Hi, and welcome to ThinkTech. We are raising public awareness about energy, technology, diversification, and globalization. This show is Center Stage, and I am your host, Donna Blanchard, proud managing director of Kumukuhua Theater. We are coming to you live from Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu, which happens to also be very close to Kumukuhua Theater. I'm going to read a little bit for you here. We broadcast live on the internet every weekday. All of our shows are streamed on ustream.tv and Spreaker.com. If you want links to our live streams or previous broadcasts, go to thinktechhawaii.com. And if you would like to be a guest in our studio for any of our productions live, email j@thinktechhawaii.com. Now, to the show. Today, my guest is Ed Salazar. He is part of Meltdown, which is one of LA's most popular weekly comedy shows. He will also be appearing on the TV adaptation of the Meltdown Show, which will be on July 23rd on Comedy Central. We're Skyping Ed in from LA. Welcome,
Hello.
Ed.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be able to have you here. I got a chance to meet Ed last week when I was in LA, and I got to see Meltdown. It was an awesome show.
Oh, yeah. I take a lot of pride in what we're doing there, and it's kind of an amazing thing to be a part of. So I'm glad you got to see it because it feels really unique to. It's a unique, like a stand-up show, I think. So I'm glad you got to see it.
It was very cool. Now, your job there in general is what?
I help with sort of the production side of things with Emily, who's the producer of the show, and then I do sort of crowd warm up and do the tech booth stuff. But also, it's a live show where anything can kind of happen. So the host and myself and Emily, we're always kind of rolling with the punches. So it's also, you're part of the sort of organic show. So I get told, this is what I'm told. I would never say this, that sort of people are like, you're the spirit animal of the show or the totem of the show. So I think I'm there just to have good vibes in a lot of ways,
And you greeted us all when we arrived initially.
Yeah.
And I think you are the spirit animal for the show.
Yeah. I don't know what Hawaii's stand-up scene is like. In LA, we have a lot of independently produced stand-up shows, and I've gone to a lot of them. And when we started doing our show, I kind of had this feeling of a lot of stand-up shows in LA, they're in different venues, and you have to sit outside for a long time, and you stand in line, and you have to wait, and then you get seated, and then you're sitting, and you're getting drinks from a server. And then by the time the show starts, you're like half asleep or you're annoyed. It's sort of like being in an airport for hours. Then you're, by the time the plane's ready to take off, you just want to take a nap. And so to fight that, we started doing kind of things like we started doing high fives where we just high five everyone and we tell them that we love them and that we're really happy to have them there and to make them feel like it's okay, you're a part of this thing too. You're as important to the show as any of the comics.
It's like that. You do a good job of relaying those feelings, and it's kind of so let me describe this. So the Meltdown is a large comic shop, and it's kind of famous. I've heard from some of my friends here who are into comics.
Yes.
It's kind of a big deal, and you hang out they have tickets available ahead of time, and we went there, and the show was sold out. It's a big deal. You hang out in the comic shop and you wait until you're allowed in, and there's a very warm kind of reciprocal feeling there. I kind of felt like we were there along with the comedians to help them with their work and let them know what's working and what isn't.
Yeah, I think that is like a part of a lot of stand-up and improv that isn't in production side. When you go to shows, I think that's part of it that's sort of ignored. It's sort of like, well, we get people in there and then we're going to put the comics on the stage, and we never get everyone on the same page. And so, and I think, we did the show, and the TV show version of this, I hope when people watch that, it's like, that will come through. It's like, you do you come through a comic book shop and it just looks like you're going to go back into the storage area, and then it opens up into this thing. So if you know about it and you show up there, it feels like you're going to a speakeasy, and it feels like you're going into a place that no one knows about. There's no sign out in front of the building that says the back of this comic book shop is a comedy club. So yeah.
Pretty big names there too, haven't you? Like Sarah Silverman has popped in to try some new material.
Yeah. I mean, we've had, there's been a lot of really amazing drop-ins. Sarah Silverman, Robin Williams has done it, which is kind of amazing. And, that's another part of how magical that space is that Robin Williams was there just to buy his comic books for the weekend and was like, what's that noise in the back? And then walked back and did a set, So, but yeah, we've pretty much had, almost every big comic has done that show. There's very few that haven't. Jim Gaffigan, Sarah Silverman. And what's also fun about it is that the spirit of the comic book shop bleeds into the comedy aspect, where it's like, if I grew up in comic book shops and it was like you hang out in a comic book shop arguing about Superman versus Batman all the time, or I like Marvel and DC, and now the comedy aspect of that has that too, where people just come by and hang out, and you'll walk out and you're like, the comics that are just hanging out are headlining comics, and that's a really awesome part of the show.
It feels like a community.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about what you are working on currently, because you're not only with Meltdown, right?
No. I also produce a monthly show that's at the same venue called Seems Legit, which is a storytelling show. It's a little bit different than a stand-up show. Storytelling shows have become popular in LA, and I'm sure they're all over. You can hear them, ever since This American Life, you've seen more and more storytelling shows sort of come out throughout the city, and I don't know if there's anything like that in Hawaii, but we have The Moth here, which is also a popular storytelling series, and I wanted to kind of do something different, and once again, what's weird is I went and saw Our Town about a year and a half ago. I saw Our Town, or maybe 2 years ago, with Helen Hunt, and it was I'd never seen it, and the way they did it was she was in that show. They break the fourth wall, and the stage director talks directly to the audience, and I'd never seen it, and I know it's like a thing that a lot of people see, but that triggered something in me where I was like, I want that ability in a storytelling show. I want the audience to be able to be a part of it. And so Twitter was becoming bigger and bigger, and what I decided was we would have one person lying, but we wouldn't tell the audience who was lying, and then over Twitter the live audience can say who they think the liar is, and we bring everybody out at the end, and we let the audience accuse the people of being a liar, and grill the storytellers and be like, did you really get to meet Vin Diesel? Did your girlfriend really break up with you while you were flying in the airplane on the way to Italy? And it really engages and invests the audience in the stories, because they're watching every story going like, well, I believe everything up until that point. That person's lying, And also it's great because it pushes the storytellers to tell these crazy stories. This one person told a story that was about how her mom worked at a place with a monkey. She worked at a zoo in New York, and the monkey was about to die, and she didn't want the monkey to die in the zoo, so she took it home, and then the monkey didn't die and ended up living for 25 years in their apartment in New York City. And everyone thought that story was she's obviously lying. There's no way that happened, and it was a true story, So it gets people to really push and you get to hear people really push their storytelling abilities and tell these really amazing stories that way.
Ringing my bell with the storytelling. I mean, that's why I'm here in Hawaii working with a
Yeah.
theater that we write and produce shows about real life people here and life here.
Right.
Did you come up with a concept for that?
Yeah, actually, last 4th of July, I was with my co-host Kristen Studdard, who won a thing in Chicago called Chicago's Best Liar, which is which is sort of like a meta comedy competition that they have. And we were both drunk on Venice Beach, and I was like, I want to do a show where we involve Twitter. And she's like, I was voted best liar, and I'm like, we should do something about lying. And so we started doing the show about a year ago from drunkenly yelling at each other on Venice Beach. So, yeah, that's how we came up with it.
Awesome. And how do you gather the people who are telling the stories?
The cool thing about storytelling as opposed to stand-up is that LA is very talented, and also I'm sure you've experienced this. Everyone has one story that they tell, like at a party, or it's their go-to big story. And so we can pull people from TV show writers, we can pull people who do storytelling shows, we can pull stand-up people, we can pull musicians into the show. And it's basically networking in Los Angeles and going like, someone will come up and go like, I have the most amazing story about the time I met The Edge from U2. And I'm like, okay, that story has to be told. We have to tell this story at the show. So it's really like being in life and paying attention to what the people around you and finding interesting people that will tell interesting stories,
Well, and I have to think if you're a part of that show in any way, including being a part of the audience, it would make you a little more aware of how amazing our stories really are.
Yeah. I mean, I think being a part of the show, as host of the show, Kristen and I do a mini version of the show at the top to kind of show how the show works. And that has pushed me to kind of, because I have to keep coming up with them, we've done 11 of them now, I have to keep coming up with these little stories in my life. And I think as a person, even as a stand-up, you tend to look at your life and go like, my life's not that interesting. I don't have 12 good stories in me. And so it forces me to really look at the details and moments in my life and go like, and find stuff. And also then go like, well, if my life isn't that interesting, then why am I not living a more interesting life? And it pushes you to create, So
Influencing life. I love
right.
it. And then coming back and telling stories about it.
Right. You're like, well, I mean, if nothing else, I'll go and take a skydiving lesson and that'll be a story. Like, there's no way jumping out of a plane isn't going to be interesting to people. So, yeah, I think it does, it does force you to look at your life differently.
Cool. And what else? You've got...
Well, I mean, I think that, I assume we're talking to people who are interested in theater and maybe some people who are interested in stand-up and doing their own thing. And I think that, being in LA is really interesting because it's constantly producing things. I'm my friend Lindsay Ames is a very good comic. We're doing a video series that's going to be, and it's like, you meet over Chinese food and go we're going to do this. And then you just go out and find the people that are willing to do it. And you just constantly surround yourself with people who will complete tasks, And so we're right now we started doing pre-production on this thing called Baked. And it's ostensibly about two people, Lindsay and I, who get high. And I will say this, in Los Angeles, marijuana is legal. So these characters get stoned, get hungry, and then we have to cook food. And so it's sort of like a combination of a sketch show and a cooking show. But we want to do it in a very artistic way. So, this is an idea that I think not surrounding yourself with the right people. This is an idea you would write down on paper and you would talk about it, and maybe you'd be 2 years later, you'd be that idea was a really funny idea. We should do that idea. And it's if one thing comes out of this, me talking to you and people seeing this, is that 6 years ago we were we should start doing comedy shows in the storage section of a comic book shop. And 3 years ago we started a weekly show. And then 2 years ago, it was pitched as a TV show, and in a month it's going to be on TV. And the only reason that happened is because we came up with the idea and we did it. And we found people who would do it. Emily and Kumail and Jonah and myself were people who would do that and finish it. And like, if you're watching this right now and if you have any interest in anything in comedy or production or performance, like, just do it and surround yourself. So like, right now I'm working on trying to sell a video series, this baked video series. We're going to produce it, and then we'll send it around to places like Jash, which is a web series, or Funny or Die or Nerdist, and see if anyone will want to invest in it. And if they don't, we'll just get our friends together and film it and put it out there.
You said surround yourself. You really are enmeshed in just a slurry of comedic talent and able, nimble minds ready to try shit out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I would say, constantly get rid of the shaft in your life. If you're in creative work, if you're into doing stuff and you want to be into performance or creating any art, like, look around you constantly and be like, am I surrounding myself with people who just want to smoke pot and talk about things in theory? Or am I surrounding myself with friends who are willing to take, you can take an iPhone, right? There's people who do stuff. There's a web series called Actress, which was all shot using practical lighting and an iPhone. It's all in black and white, and it's beautiful. You can look it up online. Surround yourself with people who are willing to do that, who are like, you know what? We all have iPhones. Let's make something. There's comedy shows in living rooms. There's you don't need anyone's permission anymore. There's Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You can make something in Hawaii, which probably seems really isolated, and literally it can be, Gangnam Style started in Korea. You know what I mean? Like, that thing has 1 billion hits or whatever. A decade ago that would have never happened. So if a Korean dance craze can go worldwide, like, a really awesome sketch in Hawaii can also. So, I mean, I want to encourage people to, like, just get out there and make stuff, Yeah.
You actually got started because you went to LA 10 years ago. I'd like to maybe go back even a little bit further than that and
Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Get your timeline. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. This is Center Stage on ThinkTech Hawaii. Be right back.
I'm Jay Fidel. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you think?
I think it's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us.
Okay, it's every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you there.
Hi, we're back and we're live. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm your host, Donna Blanchard, proud Managing Director of Kumakukua Theater, and I'm talking with Ed Salazar of Meltdown and Meltdown in LA, and what was the, Sounds Legit?
Seems legit. Nerd Melt Theater. I would say, like, Nerdist, Nerd Melt Theater.
Nerd Melt, and soon to be baked.
Soon to be baked. Well, that sounds amazing. Let's use that as the tagline for the web series.
Okay, so let's go back. Where did you grow up?
I grew up. I was an Air Force brat. I was born in Spain. We moved to Germany, and then at age 8, we moved to Nebraska. And I grew up there, and spent a lot of time in the basement of my very cold house watching Kids in the Hall and Saturday Night Live and Evening at the Improv. And I watched a lot of comedy growing up, mainly because it's freezing and you have to stay inside and watch TV in Nebraska.
And did you always know that was calling you?
You know, I think that, like, I was always very shy about, I always wanted to perform, and it was always something that was inside of me. But I fought it for a really long time, and I graduated college. I did one acting class in college and did one really terrible play. And then I moved to DC to work in like medical supply sales. And I hated it and I was miserable. And then I moved to LA and I was at a bar one night drinking and I ran into this girl and she was like doing this thing called Hollywood Hell House, which was like it's a parody of these things called hell houses, which are used by, it's a religious haunted house. And the producers of 6 Feet Under and Arrested Development decided to kind of lampoon it a little bit. And people who were like Bill Maher was involved and Andy Richter was involved and Will Arnett was involved. And I went to it one night and you can repress wanting to do what you want to do for as long as you can. But then I just ended up, whatever it was that was inside of me made me stick around and creepily hang out so long that they were like, look, if you just want to be a part of this, just come back for the next show and you're in the show. And so I played a born-again Christian for the run of that. And then my friend was writing a one-woman show and I was helping her and I was like doing punch-up. And she was like, you know, you can just go and do stand-up at an open mic. And I was like, really? And so on a rainy day in California, which is very rare, I stood outside of this place called the M Bar and waited and waited and waited. And finally they came and I was like, I thought about leaving and I went up and I was sweating, just drenched in sweat, and went up and did my first stand-up set and it went probably terrible, and there's no one in the audience but comics. There's like 5 comics. Everyone's looking at their notebook, and I was like, well, this is the thing that I want to do with my life. And I don't know why. I mean, like, I don't know why. It was such a terrible experience, but I was immediately hooked, and then just started doing stand-up, and that was about 9 years ago.
Okay, now wait. Let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
That night, you knew that you were going there to do a stand-up act. How did you prepare for that?
You know, I was fortunate. The friend who I met, she kind of like actually gave me really amazing advice, which I would give to anyone. I give the same advice to anyone who asks me this, like how to do stand-up, how to start. I say, spend about 2 weeks going to open mics, but don't perform. Go to comedy clubs, go to shows, but don't perform. Just watch. And then grab a moleskin and a pen and keep it in your back pocket. And anytime something funny crosses your mind, write it down and then keep watching. And it's important to kind of like, I think it's important to sort of inoculate yourself to the very easy stuff, which like comedians would say is hack or whatever, but like I think there's stuff that's very pedestrian, or like that every guy who writes their first set is like, I'm going to talk about jerking off and pornography, and it's like, yeah, everyone's already written that unless it's a really original take on that, you're going to like sound like a million people doing their first set. So I think it's important to kind of see what's going on in comedy before you jump up on stage and perform. But yeah, so I went and prepared and I wrote a bunch of bits, and they're actually like, they're bits that I still do. Like my first set was bad, not because of the material or the jokes that I wrote. It's mainly bad because I was shaking, you know, and nervous. But I think I prepared in the right way, and I would say that's like the best way to do stand-up for the first time.
And you had seen enough of it that you were as mentally prepared as you could be.
Yeah. I mean, really, like, go and see if you're thinking about doing stand-up. And I think the internet makes this easier for like smaller places where there's not a lot of comics. Like, really watch a lot of stand-up and really go to open mics and see what the open mics comics are doing, and like meet them and be cool, like be a good person, have good energy, because then also thing is that if you build a relationship with them the first time you go up on stage. I'll explain how to do stand-up for the first time, and maybe someone out there is interested. But like, if you want to do stand-up for the first time, this is what I always tell people: watch stand-up, write down funny ideas, spend some time coming up with those ideas. If you have a microphone at home, stand in front of the mirror and just get comfortable holding the mic so you don't fidget. Go up on stage, tell them that you're doing stand-up for the first time. Go like, my name's Ed Salazar. I'm really nervous. This is my first time doing stand-up. Everyone will clap probably. If they don't, they're jerks, and if they don't like you, it's not your fault. Tell what you have written down. If you run out of material and you've only done 2 minutes, say, that's all I have. It's all I wanted to do. Get off the stage, and you've done your first set. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And if you only have ever done it once, you've scratched that itch off. You've done your jumping out of a plane with it. So, that's how you do it.
You did that once, and you said that you didn't feel like it was wholly successful. Let's say.
No. I think it took like 2 months of really going, and it probably wasn't as bad as I remember it, but it probably took like 2 months before I felt like I was getting laughs and getting comfortable. And to be honest, like, the interesting thing about comedy and stand-up maybe in particular is that it will constantly humble you. Like Louis C.K. talks about how he was a successful comic. He was on HBO's Young Up and Comers. He was at the Improv. He was a working comic. He didn't have a day job. And my roommate just came home, by the way. Hi. And he was a successful comic and everything. And he went up one night and hated all of his material, and then just said, "You know what is the problem is with my life is my kid's an asshole." And that changed how he did stand-up, and it evolved him. So it's like comedy constantly is breaking you, and you constantly have to fix it and fix yourself, and that makes you stronger and better and makes you evolve. And so it constantly hurts. It's like it's constantly terrible, but then great.
Okay, that you have to be called to something that constantly hurts and breaks you down and builds you back up.
Honestly, like, I don't think it's different than any piece of art. Like, I don't think really great actors are constantly choosing roles that push them, right? Like, the really great actors are like putting themselves in physical discomfort or putting them in to characters' mindsets that are not comfortable to be in. Like you watch, like, I think like The Master, you saw that movie, like those are two actors who are just shoving themselves into two people who are awful, and pushing themselves. And I think that, like, that's something you have to do if you want to be good at any art,
Yeah, I think that art as well as life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. If you're not
really
willing to push that, then stay home.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did your first stand-up, you're hanging out, you're getting to know this group of comedians, and then what? Where'd we go then?
I spent a lot of time, you kind of spend time sort of doing two things. Like, you get better at doing stand-up, but also you're sort of building a community around you. And LA in particular, because of traffic, you tend to hang out more. Like, you're like, I'm going to do my show. There's no reason to get in my car. So we kind of tend to have a very clubby sort of group of people where you really get to become friends with people. And then you start collaborating. And I think I think that that's the sort of, you kind of go two paths with comedy, where it's like you can either be a part of something that's already established, where it's like you can hang out at the Improv or the Comedy Store or the Laugh Factory, and that's fine. Like, you slowly work your way up and you get stage time, you get better at comedy through getting little bits of time there. Or you go off on your own and you sort of start creating your own spaces to create and perform. And that's sort of what I ended up doing. So when the UCB opened, I started studying there, which is the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, which is a really popular improv theater and sketch writing. And I learned sketch writing from there. And then I would go to comedy shows and I'd be like, I don't think these shows are run correctly, or this isn't how I would do it. And I kind of felt like, well, if it's dumb for me to complain about that. It's not. I think there's a lot of people in comedy who will complain, and it's like, well, you got to put your time where your mouth is, in a way. And so at that point, I started learning how to produce shows at different venues to sort of create more stage time for myself, but also because I just wanted to help create a circuit of really good shows, to where every night there's a place for comedians to perform and work on their material. And yeah, that's it. Like you sort of have to learn not just the skill set of being a comedian, but the skill set of like being an event creator.
Yeah, gotcha. Can you talk a little bit more about the sketch writing, studying that,
Sure.
and what you've done with that?
I mean, so I was doing stand-up for like about 4 years when the UCB opened, and I just wanted to work on a different sort of area of comedy. And so when the UCB opened, I kind of jumped on it very early on. And I think that, it all bleeds together. You're always, any improvement on yourself kind of makes you better in all aspects. But I think the difference that improv teaches you is to really pay attention to what you're doing and what's going on around you. And it teaches you to be patient, because the UCB really stresses sort of listening and finding the unique things that are going on and building on that. So, for example, kind of like going back into my life and going like, I was the only Hispanic person living in my town. And that's the interesting thing about growing up where I grew up, was like growing up as the only minority, even though I'm not much of a minority. And then sort of building a bit around that. And so learning to do that through improv was really important. And then with sketch writing, I think like that really teaches you to sort of collaborate, because stand-up is very much on your own in some ways. And so with sketch writing, you need other people. You need at least one other person. Otherwise, it's going to be a very boring sketch where you're just talking. So I really had to push myself to kind of learn to be with people. And there's some really great, there's a book called Truth and Comedy, which I recommend reading, which is sort of about the Del Close theory of improv. And that will give you like the basis for good improv and good sketch. And now the UCB actually has a book that's also very good, which will help people with writing. And then with the UCB style of improv, it's called long form. What sort of happens is that, and I'm sure you do improv. You've done improv, obviously, correct?
Yeah.
It's about taking an idea and organically building it with another person. And each of you are sort of throwing things on top of each other. But what the UCB sort of teaches you is to kind of create an overall through line and look for the pattern between all of the improvisation. And so now what I'm doing is like trying to sell TV shows. That's where it really comes in handy, is sort of like taking small elements and piecing them together into going from like a 5-page sketch to now a 30 to 60-page script, teleplay. So I think that's where that really is like a helpful skill.
Yeah.
Does Did that answer make sense?
It did, but let's go a little further. Like
Sure.
baked, you're talking about. Is that all to be scripted?
Yeah, well, what we're doing with Baked, for example, is it's going to be a very visual script, but from the improv, what we've done is sort of we'll sit together at a table and basically go back and forth. And, one of the keys to improv is yes-anding something, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, but it's sort of like you're just sitting there with someone and you're running the scenes in your head, but she'll say, well, okay, we're getting high, and then we get hungry, and then I'll say, yes, but there can't be anything in our refrigerator, and then she'll say, there'll only be the ingredients that we need specifically to make the item that we want to make, and then I'll say, yes, so we're going to make it, but we're going to make it in the way that stoners make it, and then she'll say, we're going to use cuts that are really dramatic and like sort of in a Wes Anderson style show. And then I'll say, yes, and we also have a guest who's sitting there waiting for us to cook it. And she'll say, yes, and it's going to take us a long time. And then I'll say, yes, and then by the time we're done making the food, the person will have left that we're supposed to cook for it. And she'll say, yes, and then we'll just sit down and totally forget that we were supposed to make something. And so, like, that's how we wrote. We just wrote it that fast. And that's because we both took improv. We both studied that we learned to build a scene really quickly together.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. So, okay, and we're going to take another little break here.
Great.
We're going to come back and we're going to talk about more about your development and what you're working on now. I'd like to be able to get behind the scenes in your head when you are putting together a stand-up routine.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to take a short break. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm Donna Blanchard talking with Ed Salazar, and we will be right back.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Hi, we're back. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm Donna Blanchard talking with Ed Salazar of LA. And we're just going to say of LA because he has so many different things going on.
I want to say Hollywood.
Hollywood. Ed Salazar of Hollywood.
Hollywood. It sounds way more impressive.
It does. We're going to go with that. So, okay, did we miss anything in your background? You started, I think we have come full circle and we're back at present.
I think we are, yeah, suffering through stand-up, learning to write sketch and improv, trying to sell movies, TV shows, being on a TV show, and now we're here.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Now we're here. And how often are you doing stand-up?
I try to do stand-up 2 to 3 times a week minimum. Feel like anything less than that and you start to lose your edge. And also, for me personally, like if you want to talk about the process of creating new material, I find that if I'm not if I'm not hanging out at just an open mic or whatever, my brain doesn't want to switch into that gear. Like I can't sit down. I don't write material where it's like I'm sitting down on my computer and I'm sort of generating material for stand-up. I need to be put into that environment where everyone's talking about stand-up and it's just stand-up. And I think that's how most stand-ups are. You sort of have like, when you're working on creating material, you sort of have these different phases of a bit or like a chunk. You might have a joke that you have an idea for, and you write it down on your Moleskine or your notebook, or you write it on your iPhone, and then you go up on stage in an open mic, which might be in front of 10 other comics in a coffee shop that's not that happy to have you there, and then being on stage for whatever reason makes you say that joke, and then that adds then an appendage comes up on to that joke, and then you're like, oh, that's something. Like, you knew it was funny, but you didn't know why until it came out of your mouth. It came through speakers and went to people who may or may not even be paying attention to you. And then you keep doing that for a few open mics, and then you get a book show, and maybe there's 100 people in front of you, and then you will say it, and then you go, oh, okay, and you polish it a little bit more, and then you'll see, like, oh, that thing that I built, maybe it's like a 2-minute thing about the time that a drug dealer offered me cocaine and I turned it down, also goes along with this part about me getting my first apartment in Los Angeles, and it just tucks right back in there, and you put it together, and now you have two 2-minute bits that are now like a 5-minute chunk. And then you take that and you start putting stuff around it and polishing it and adding little ornaments and little asides and things to the audience, and then that becomes a 10-minute bit, and then that goes into your whole bit about moving from Nebraska and coming to Los Angeles and all the weird things about Los Angeles, and now it's a half an hour bit about that. And then that's something that you can take to people and go like, this is a half an hour bit about who I am, a kid from the Midwest living in Hollywood. Do you want to own this? And so that's sort of like the process of building a comedy act or stand-up act, or at least for me.
Oh, okay. So most of the building, let me see if I got this right. Most of the building is, you're not storyboarding this stuff. You are.
I mean, I think like when you're doing these sort of an open mic is like usually a bunch of comics, somewhere between like 20 or 30 comics at a venue that doesn't mind you being there, like a coffee shop or whatever, or like comedy clubs usually have one open mic night, and they're shorter sets, and it's just meant for you to kind of throw out your new ideas, and those are meant to those are your like bricks. Those are your sort of very small little bricks that you're like trying to generate and see if there's anything to build on, and that's your first thing that you need. And when you're first doing stand-up, that's all you're doing, is just getting as many little building blocks as you can so that you can build something larger.
Okay. Thank you for going through that. I did not realize that so much of the process happened live. I did an improv show that ran for 2 years, and what you are talking about scares the bejeebies out of me. I want a script. I want a script.
Well, some comics do write out jokes, but I think that for whatever reason, the magic of stand-up, you can write it and you can work on it as much as you want before you get on stage, but like it's not tested until you get up on stage, and things that you think are funny like won't hit, and you're like, I was 100% sure that joke that I worked on for half an hour trying to get it right was gonna kill, and then you're like, oh, no one else knows who Steely Dan is, like, and so this 10-minute chunk you wrote about Steely Dan is just gonna fall flat unless you're in front of people who are into prog rock and jazz fusion. So like that, I think that's kind of an amazing thing about stand-up, is that you have to, the trick of stand-up in a way is learning how to serve something that you think is funny to everyone, so that everyone can process why you think it's funny. I mean, like, I'm a narcissist, and I think a big part of like what draws me to stand-up is like trying to communicate my life to other people, and like just reaching out to other people and going like, I talk a lot about depression. I have depression. I talk a lot about it on stage, and what's funny is like you'll mention it and people will go like, oh, and be like kind of sad about it. And you're like, no, the reason I'm talking about it is because I want to show you why I think it's silly that I have this thing. Like, I think depression is really ridiculous. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing that I have. I live in paradise. I drive a Prius. I have a nice apartment. I have a computer. I have everything that I could ever want, but yet, like, there's days where I'm underneath a comforter for like 6 hours. That's really funny. That's funny to me. Like, so like learning how to like communicate what's what is like funny to you is a huge part of stand-up, and making it universal is like the huge part of stand-up. So that's what an open mic is for, is to learn to take those ideas, and if you can make 40 people who really are only thinking about themselves and what they're going to do on stage laugh at something, then you can make 1,000 people at at an arena laugh at something. It's the hardest audience is the first audience you go up for in stand-up.
Sure.
The least welcoming audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you constantly adding new material, or are you, would you say if you're performing 2 or 3 times a week, are you taking the same chunk of material to different audiences, or are you constantly?
What I'm trying to do, when I'm really like working on stuff, it's like, what I'll do is like start at one point, do this and force myself to do the same material, and like write new material and get rid of the stuff that's not good, and like add new material and keep doing the same 3 to 5 minutes all week long. And then hopefully by the end of the week, it's something that's like really good that can go in with the stuff that I've already written. And then I'll get to do a show that's like a good show with a real audience. It's not an open mic. And I'll pick the best things, and I'll try to see what the through line is with all of that stuff. And then I'll go up on stage and do that. I have dyslexia, so to be honest, like set lists and stuff don't work for me. So I generally kind of think of things as like a cloud, and I go, well, I've been working on these ideas, and I know I want to start with this thing and end with this thing, and I have this basket of things to play with that I can pull from, and whatever comes to my mind while I'm on stage, I know I have a joke for it. So I'll be like, I start with a joke about being single. That's my first joke, and maybe that makes me think about my last girlfriend, and then that takes me to a terrible breakup, and then I know that I want to end with the chunk about my favorite restaurant, and I sort of just pull things constantly to like piece them together to get me to that point, and try to keep it as loose and organic as possible.
Wow. Thank you so much for going through the detail of that. I really appreciate it. I've been involved in theater for 30 plus years, and I appreciate that amount of details. First, I've heard a lot of it.
I feel like I think we started encouraging people to do stuff, and then by the end of me describing how to do it, we've discouraged it.
You will be under the comforter for 6 hours.
I'm going to be full of shame because of this interview. No, this has been really great. Getting to talk about myself for 60 minutes is pretty awesome. I love it. It's my favorite thing.
Just think of it as one big open mic. We're all applauding for you. We just have like 2 minutes left here. Do you have any? Because I'm kind of cruel, I would really love to hear a story about a time when something just flopped that you did. Do you have one of those?
Think if I can think of any of those times. Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of them. I will say I kind of got cocky early on doing stand-up. I was like, I got this. I'm doing okay. So I was at a bar, and I had to go up late, and the bartender had got to know me, so she was pouring me Jack and Cokes, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I'll just drink a few of these and I've got this. I'm killing. I destroyed at a laundromat last week. Everything's going fine. Everything's cool. I'm going to do this set. It's going to be awesome. So I'm drinking, and I'm having a good time. And you know how, when you're sitting down and you're drinking, and you don't know you're drunk until you stand up, and you're like, oh, I'm really drunk. So I'm sitting down, and I've probably had 3 Jack and Cokes by a bartender who's friendly with me, so it's probably 6 Jack and Cokes. And they go, come to the stage next is a really funny guy, new comic. He's been great. Everyone please welcome Ed Salazar. And I stand up and immediately realize that I am just hammered, really wasted. And I sort of swerve my way through all these tightly, people are eating, and I'm bumping into them, and you can hear that weird loud noise of forks hitting plates as I'm knocking things out of people's hands. And I get up on stage, and the the brightest lights I've ever seen in my life, like, are coming. Like, I'm standing in front of a semi truck at this point, just coming at me, and I just go, and I don't know why I said this. I just said, "Do you folks like impressions?" And they're an audience, so they're just polite. They probably don't care about impressions, but they politely clap and they're like, "Yes, we like impressions." And I go, "I don't know any impressions," and I say, "Thank you very much," and I walked off stage, and that was it. The shortest comedy stand-up set in the history of comedy, and I did it. I haven't integrated that into my act in any way, so.
I think that is awesome. That's a fabulous story. I can't think of a better way to wrap up the interview. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. I mean, I was there, I got to talk with you, and I'm really glad to have this our opportunity to get you one-on-one and really drill in there. I appreciate it. And
Thank you very much.
I need to say thank you very much to Monica Brown, who introduced me to Ed and to Nerd Melt and helped make all this happen.
Just a delight.
And she's also my darling niece. So yeah, I got to throw that in there. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to read some stuff and we're going to sign off, Ed. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
We're out of time. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series. I would like to thank our stage manager, Zuri. Zuri, what's your last name?
Bender.
Zuri Bender. She's a new stage manager for me anyway. I've been out of town, so I apologize. I'll get it right next time. To Ian Davidson, who is our production manager and is in my ear. Our communications director, Chrissy Goffigan. And to Jay Fidel, who somehow manages to put it all together. Thank you very much for being here, and we will see you next week on Center Stage. Bye.